Alright, let's talk about the 2-minute meta. Hello everyone, my name is Edrem, animatronic puppet VTuber and content enjoyer. And if you like these videos, remember to like, comment and subscribe so we can make some more in the future. We've just managed to reach the requirements for YouTube partner, so I'm hoping to make more in the future. But anyway, I want to talk about the 2-minute meta in Final Fantasy XIV. But I also want to talk about not just the cons, but also the pros. A lot of people have complained before about the 2-minute meta and the staleness and the job design and things like that. I want to kind of offer partially a opposite view of, hey, this is the reason why the 2-minute meta is good. So let's go into it. Firstly, for those who don't know, who don't quite understand the whole situation here, the 2-minute meta is that pretty much every job in the game will have their big attack line up every 2 minutes. So at the very start of a fight, 2 minutes into a fight, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, so on. At the same time, you'll have the big raid buffs also line up. So not only do you have people doing your biggest attacks, you have them doing it while everyone has their buffs up, and also you have all the people doing the buffs at the same time. And that's another big thing. So it ends up stacking up to a lot of more damage, right? The big burst is the main design around this. Interesting thing with how buffs work that I don't see a lot of people know about. Buffs in 14 are multipliers, right? So let's say we have a 100 potency attack, and then we have a buff that gives plus 50 potency. Now you would go, all right, how much damage does that do? It's like, okay, it's easy. And you can figure out in your head 150 potency. Okay. What if we have two buffs that give plus 50% potency? Now you might immediately just go, oh, that should be 200 potency, right? And if it was an additive system where the buffs add together, you'd be right. But it's not. Final Fantasy uses a multiplying system. So it's 100 times 1.5 for the first buff, and then we get 150 potency, and then it's 150 potency times another 1.5. So you actually get out of it 225 potency. And this is why stacking the buffs is so big, because you get more and more potency out of it. There's actually a really interesting thing here where if you've ever gone into Bosja and you see those 1v1 duels, this is the math behind buff stacking, where people stack a huge amount of buffs all on top of each other in order to massively boost one spell. And you can see with the multiplier system, you end up buffing your potency by 1,812%. If it was the additive system, it would only be a little less than 500%. And that means that Lost Flare Star, which is the ability you do, ends up going from a 350 potency dot to a 6,342 potency dot, ticking every 3 seconds. And that's why those enemies melt. But anyway, I just wanted to show that off because I love posture. So how did this come about, and why did we get here? Like, why did we get to the 2-minute? Before the 2-minute meta, we actually had the 6-minute meta. As in, we had people whose abilities were 1 minute, 1 minute and a half, and 2 minutes. So what would happen then is everything would line back up for 6 minutes, right? The people who could only do it every minute and a half, they would do it 90 seconds into the fight, 180 seconds in the fight, 270 seconds in the fight, and then do it line up with everyone else, right? Same for the other jobs. And then that would also be when you'd pot. You'd want to pot 6 minutes in as your second pot. So we kind of had to change this a little bit because of the way that fights are designed. And this is something that, if you go and watch my video where I talk about Pictomancer and job homogenization, the DPS of a job doesn't just depend on the job itself. It heavily depends on the design of bosses. And as they've gone through the expansions and changed the design, right? Endwalkers, when we got the 2-minute meta, in Shadowbringers it was still the 6-minute meta. Stormblood was a whole other system of stuff. And Dawntrail has kept the 2-minute meta. As we've gone through, we've changed how the bosses are designed because we don't want a situation where one job is either too strong or too weak. We've had that in the past, and it always causes a lot of drama and a lot of confusion in the community. The most recent one being that Pictomancer, in my video, I talked about it. It was too strong in through. People wanted it to be nerfed, not realizing that actually it did normal damage, or relatively a little bit higher than normal, but still like completely fine damage in Savage. And what happened is Pictomancer had to be homogenized. They had to put all of its big damage now, move it around so that it's basically the same as the other jobs. So there is a thing about this. Some of that of like, yes, it's annoying when you get an interesting class, but it would suck as well if you go into a fight and it's like, well, you can't play this job because it's just not good at this specific fight, right? That would suck worse for players. I always ask people of that, of like, would you be interested in having an interesting job, like a job that's more complex to do, if you were completely locked out of the raid tier sometimes as well, because your job just didn't do enough damage? It's like, would that be good enough for people? It's like, there's a trade-off to there. People want both, not realizing you can't always have both. But anyway, so like I was saying before, we used to have this thing where we had buffs at a minute, 90 seconds, and 2 minutes. But what's happened is, let's say you have a boss. Let's say you're old black mage and you have your ley lines at 90 seconds. You're fighting the boss. It's coming up, and in 80 seconds in the fight, the boss jumps away for 20 seconds. All right, maybe 30 seconds. What do you do now if your ley lines? Your ley lines comes up 10 seconds into that. The boss isn't there. You can't target it. You're doing mechanics. What ends up happening? It's like, well, now you need to basically do your ley lines later. But then that throws you out because now you're not part of the 2-minute meta. Now you're not getting the big buff with everyone else. And that's going to happen continuously for the rest of the fight, right? You're not going to get the big buffs at 2 minutes. You're not going to get the big buff at 4 minutes. You're not going to get the big buff at 6 minutes. Unless you drop a ley lines in one of the buffs and then bring it back in. It's like, well, that also feels terrible. So the idea behind designing every single job for a 2-minute meta now is we know, hey, we can get the boss to jump away, 80 seconds into the fight, and it'll be completely fine. Because everyone has a 2-minute meta, right? Everyone has that big meta. Except for Warrior, which technically has a minute. It's a little bit different. So they can design fights more around, like, hey, everyone has the common kit they will use to approach it. So we can design this to take advantage of that. We can design more interesting bosses. There was a big thing they said back from Stormblood to Shadowbringers, which I know a lot of people have not played Stormblood when it came out. Shadowbringers was when it got popular. They wanted to remove the complexity from the jobs and add that into the fights. And I think long term this has been good, but it has made people like wish that we had both systems, right? There's a lot of people out there that like wish we had really complex bosses and also really complex jobs. But it's also a situation of like, how would you design those jobs? How's things going to act? It's way too many moving parts to start having to worry. And the problem then is you got fights where just people wouldn't do it. People just would not be happy in Party Finder. And Party Finder is the biggest thing. You look at the fact that when P8S came out and they had to nerf it a week later, the biggest reason for that, most likely, is the fact that Party Finder started locking people out. They were like, oh, you play this job? No, you can't join us. And that's when the developers are like, okay, well, we kind of have to really respond to this. Because even if the fight is fine, if the community is being bad about it, that's a problem. So there's kinds of things there. Now, I do think that there's something they're doing now that can help fix this. And if you're a Black Mage main, I mean, apart from the fact that you're probably really, really annoyed about the timer, time is being removed in 7.2. There is something here that's interesting, and I kind of want to see if they're going to bring it forward in 8.0, not as a remix of the 2-minute meta, because a lot of people think that they're going to completely drop the 2-minute meta. I don't think so. I think they're going to iterate on it and change it. And Black Mage, I think, is an example of how they can do that. Because Black Mage's big 2-minute burst, ley lines, now has a charge. You now get 2 of them at the start of a fight. Which means that you don't actually have to line it up perfectly with the fight, right? So let's say here we have, let's say we do a little ley lines here. All right, we do one there. Now, this is the 2 minutes coming up. We need to place down another ley lines, and that's the 4 minutes. We can do it. We can actually move this one around. We can move the ley lines around a little bit. As long as we cast it before 2 minutes, we're not going to overcap it. All right? And I think that's an interesting kind of design to do, because that means that, hey, you still have that big burst. You still have that reward for teaming up with the people in the group and managing to coordinate the burst together. But you have flexibility. You have a lot more flexibility now. And that also is really good for the raid designers as well, because, you know, there's a lot of stuff now where it's like a raid designer can have a really interesting idea, but it just doesn't work because the jobs just don't work properly with it. Or they have to make a lot of changes, or they have to make a lot of concessions and remove things to get stuff to work. So I can see going forward them possibly wanting to add the charges to more stuff in the future. Like any of the big raid buffs we have, any of the 2 minute minute meta buffs that we currently do, I could see them being a charge in the future. You do technically add 1 extra use of that to the end of the fight, but I also think that's kind of cool. Because, you know, let's say we have a group that's going through and they're getting to the enrage, right? Well, that's when you can pop that last emergency raid buff. You know, everyone can go in and like, okay, we need to do it. We need to pop in and we need to pop everything and go. And we would have that now, assuming you didn't like emergency use it during the fight. But I think that'd be an interesting little design. And it's more like a improvement on the system rather than changing it. Because no matter what people say, I don't think the 2 minute meta is going away, because I think it has too many advantages in the design of the fights at the cost of making the jobs a bit simpler. But yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to do a quick little video on 2 minute meta. Just wanted to do things. Mostly it's because I had this and I'm like, I want to show this off because I love Bosnia. Yo, do you guys want to do some Bosnia 1v1s? I'm a little bit sad that Occult Crescent does not appear to have 1v1s, but I'm still excited. I'm still excited. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time. All right, bye.